El Salvador is the smallest country in Central America with only 21,000 square kilometers. That's 8,100 square miles of land. El Salvador shares borders with Guatemala. Farther north, El Salvador shares border with Honduras, and in the southwest, the Gulf of Fonseca separates El Salvador from Nicaragua. We are also the most densely populated country in Central America. Some official numbers say that the population is between 6 and 6.5 million people, but some more accurate number might be between 7 and 7.5 million people living in the country. If we translate the name El Salvador to the English language, it would be the Savior. The people are called Cuscatlecos or Salvadorian, and all of the people in El Salvador mainly speak Spanish. You can find people that speak English very well because of the migration to North America.
Leaving behind the pre-colonial era, we move into the independence. In 1821, the Spanish authorities signed the Act of Independence. Initially, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and El Salvador rapidly formed the Federal Republic of Central America. But in 1822, Mexico wanted to join the new federation to their empire under Agustín Iturbide. El Salvador immediately said no to the plans and resisted the principles of autonomy of all countries. Mexico sent immediately its military machinery and decided to invade El Salvador, but the Salvadorian army defeated the Mexican aggression, and Iturbide had to pack its bag and go home. So long, my friends from Mexico. This was the first military war and military victory of the newly formed country. At the end of the 19th century, a new phenomenon was born. There were a new breed of presidents that promoted the coffee plantations as the predominant crop, and in short became the basis of our economy. To make this possible, there had to be many changes in the land holding for its production to grow. And between these and that, the campesinos, which are the landlords or were the landlords, had to be moved to different areas, which made an enormous discontent. In the first half of the 20th century, the military regime started to rise and rule the country for almost 50 years. Those years were a mix of national growth and a dictatorship. In those 5 decades, you can find important development all across the country. You can find cross-country roads, electric dams, international airports, international maritime ports, and a progress and development of the government offices. It is impossible to leave behind the international menace of communism. These years were full of repressions of civil rights, record arrests, and many others in favor of stopping the communist advance in the country and also in Latin America. All this led us to a civil war that lasted since 1979 to 1992. That was the official war that had casualties for over 100,000 people in the country. Oh, I almost forgot our second war. In 1969, El Salvador invaded Honduras after thousands of Salvadorian families living many years in Honduras were deported unjustly from the country, and all the properties that they had worked, they were confiscated. The war was internationally known as the Football Soccer War, or the 100-hour war, because the two countries coincided in a riot during the FIFA World Cup qualifier. The third contemporary war is the civil war mentioned before. This was a political war between the leftists, represented by the terrorist anti-government group called FMLN, and the right wing, represented by the government. The government had been ruled by the right-wing party, PCN, and this political party was highly backed by the military and the rich families of the country.
In the early 1980s, there was a massive US intervention led by the Ronald Reagan administration, which its only goal was to stop the communist advance in Latin America. In 1992, after many negotiations between the terrorists and the government, a fancy peace agreement was signed and ended the political conflict. Our current war started in Los Angeles, California. Yes, LA. And we are not at war with our friends of the US. The story goes like this. During our civil war, people from all over the country where the military conflict was heavily fought escaped and left the cities because of the atrocities that happened in their territory. These Salvadorians went to the US. Salvadorians knew that the US city that had the most Latin American was LA. And when they arrived, they found themselves in territory disputes. Yes, imagine that, territory fights. This time between black people, Chinese, and Mexicans. The Salvadorians were in total disadvantage in the LA jungle. And since some of them were not just civilians, but also part of the terrorist or military who left their original cities, they started to build a community that could keep them safe from other groups. This became some kind of a vigilante group and turned later on to be one of the most fearsome gangs in the world. Even the US government has placed them in the same level of the biggest drug cartels in the world. By the late 80s and the beginning of the 90s, these gangs had risen the crime in Los Angeles in an unprecedented levels. And when all that was made public, the deportations started. The US government decided to send back to El Salvador all these problematic and delinquents that participated in these problems in the streets of LA. Planes chartered full of gang members started to arrive in El Salvador at their international airport. These criminals, when arrived to our airport, were free. Imagine, they were free because most of them didn't have an open criminal process. And there was no bilateral police and judicial work between the two authorities. So as you can imagine, this problem continued on and on. People came and they went back to the US to do the same thing that they were used to do. There was no plan here to take them into a new job, to prepare them for the future. Nothing. So the gangs have continued to grow until today that we are having this video, 2019, and it's said to be more than 100,000 gang members.